and welcome to the Dreary Midnight Podcast. My name is Lisa. My pronouns are she, they.
My name is Celeste. My pronouns are she, her.
And tonight is a Celeste-led episode. So what are we talking about?
Well, I have a little preamble. So originally, I was going to do another Appalachian anomalies. I keep saying that wrong. Appalachian. Thank you. I said it right.
Yeah.
I was going to do another Appalachian anomalies. Yesterday, you and I and a few of our friends went to a Edgar Allan Poe inspired escape room.
Yeah.
Which I was like...
Okay, it's yesterday as we're recording this, but this is coming out in late August, so it'll be a month ago by the time you hear this.
Yeah. But at the time of recording and researching, it was yesterday. Yeah. So I was like, man, I should do something Poe related, that'd be fun. But the first episode of Dreary Midnight Podcast was the mysterious death of Edgar Allan Poe. You should go listen to that. Lisa did that episode.
Listen to me have a cold.
I just re-listened to it and I could not tell that you had a cold.
Appreciate that.
Anyway. So I was like, okay, well, we've already covered the death of Edgar Allan Poe. Obviously, I was like, I don't want to do a reading. And I was just kind of scrolling through his Wikipedia page, being like, what else happened in his life? And then I heard about a woman named Lizzie Doten.
Who?
Yeah, that's what I said.
Yeah.
But apparently, Lizzie Doten had a literal ghostwriter, which was Edgar Allan Poe.
Okay, when you say literal ghostwriter.
Well, today we're going to talk about the spiritualist poet, Lizzie Doten.
Okay, let's get into it. I get where you're going with that. But elaborate on that anyway, just to be sure.
So, Lizzie, her name was Elizabeth Lizzie Doten. Mm-hmm. She was an American poet, lecturer, and a trance speaker who was part of the spiritualist movement.
Okay.
For those who aren't familiar or who maybe just need a refresher, spiritualism was a social religious movement in the 19th century. According to which an individual's awareness persists after death and may be contacted by the living. So it was started in 1848 with the Fox sisters, which I think we've referenced on this podcast before, which were the sisters who they used rappings in order to say that they were contacting the dead.
Wasn't that also shown that at least some of the time they had
they
could pop their knees or something?
They admitted that they could. They basically had toe joints that made cracking noises when they put their toes a certain way, and I think knee joints too. Yeah. So that was kind of exposed as fraud, but it's basically kickstarted the spiritualism movement, and of course with every movement, there's always a bunch of social and economic things that lead up to it.
Yeah.
But so the spiritualism movement was ripe in the 1850s. Now, Lizzie Doten, she was born on April 1st, 1827 in Plymouth, Massachusetts.
Okay.
She was the seventh of 9 children. To parents Samuel and Rebecca Doten.
Okay.
So Samuel was actually a descendant of Edward Doty, who was a passenger of the Mayflower and one of the signers of the Mayflower contract. Elizabeth's mother, Rebecca, or I should say Lizzie, because she always referred to herself as Lizzie, even in a professional setting.
Yeah.
So Lizzie's mother, Rebecca, was also was a descendant of William Bradford, who was the Pilgrim governor of the Plymouth colony. So either way, the Doten family had connections. I think 2 of her brothers were fought in the Union Army, and they were high-ranking officials. One of her brothers moved during the gold rush, and he became a journalist and who wrote a lot of writings about the West.
Okay.
Now Lizzie, she was educated in Plymouth Public School until 17, when she attended a private school for a year, and she was very well educated. especially for the time. And she wrote poetry in her childhood and continued to write poetry and short stories through adulthood. She wrote a few stories and a few of her own poetry, but her most famous poems were those she obtained with the help of famous deceased authors, most notably Edgar Allan Poe. So keep in mind, this is the spiritualism movement. This is when people, their main thing is where we can get in contact with the dead. So this is when, like, mediums are really big, psychics.
Is that when Ouija boards started to catch off?
You know what?
Kick off?
I haven't looked into that, but I 100% think that's probably true.
Okay.
Because that's basically what they would do, seances and stuff.
Okay.
In her first book of poetry, Poems of the Inner Life, she wrote a very, very long opening where she describes the mystical experiences from her childhood. And I'm just getting snippets because literally this is a very long intro.
Okay.
So, looking back upon my experience, I cannot doubt that I, with many others, was destined to this phase of development and designed for this peculiar work before I knew conscious being. My brain was fashioned and my nervous system finely strung so that I should inevitably catch the thrill of the innumerable voices resounding through the universe and translate their messages into human language as coherently and clearly as my imperfections would allow.
Okay.
That's how she explained, like, how it happened.
Okay.
Then she says, I turned back to the memories of my childhood, to that long course of trying experiences through which I passed, guided by strange and invisible influences. And that whole course of discipline has for me now a peculiar significance. Those who were near and dear to me and who were most familiar with my habits of life knew little of my intense spiritual experience. I was much too afraid of being ridiculed and misunderstood to dare give any expression to the strange and indefinable emotions within me. Such ones, however, may call to mind the child who often, through the long winter evenings, sat in profound silence by the fireside, with her head and face enveloped in her apron, as to exclude, as far as possible, all external sight and sound. Then she goes into a whole bunch of other stuff, and then she kind of explains how this would happen. So, often, in the retirement of a small closet, I spent hours in total darkness, lying prostrate on the floor, beating the waves of the mysterious infinite that rolled in a stormy flood over me, and with prayers and tears beseeching deliverance from my blindness and seeming unbelief. Then, when by my earnestness the spirit had become stronger than the flesh, I would gradually fall into a deep trance, from which I would arise strengthened and consoled by the assurance, from whence I could not tell, that somewhere in the future I should find all the life and light and freedom that my soul desired. The only evidence or knowledge which those around me received of such visitations was occasionally a poem, some of them written so early in life that the childish chirography rendered them almost illegible. So basically she's saying that since she was a kid, she would go into these trances and she would be given like extraterrestrial or like spiritual knowledge from another realm. And even as a child, she would get like little glimpses of poems and she would write them down, but because she was a child, then it just didn't make sense.
Yeah.
But apparently she also alluded to like premonitions where it's like, oh, I knew that in the future these would all make sense to me or something.
Yeah.
So throughout the years, Lizzie got more in tune with these visions and authors. Okay, so this is how she explains actually how she gets the poems. So, in relation to the poems given under direct spirit influence, I would say that there has been a mistake existing in many minds concerning them, which I take the present opportunity as far as possible to correct. They were not like lightning flashes coming unheralded and vanishing without leaving a trace behind. Several days before they were given, I would receive intimations of them. Oftentimes, and particularly under the influence of Poe, I would awake in the night from a deep slumber, and detached fragments of those poems would be floating through my mind, though in a few moments after they would vanish like a dream. I have sometimes awakened myself by repeating them out loud. I have been informed also by these influences that all their poems are as complete and finished in spirit life as they are in this, and the only reason why they cannot be repeated again and again is because of the difficulty of bringing a human organism always into the same state of exaltation, a state in which mediums readily receive inspiration and render the poems with the least interference of their own intellect. Yeah. So it's basically like she has a muse. The only difference is that these muses are the literal spirits of authors telling her what to write in their name. Any thoughts so far?
I am a little bit worried for her health, physically and mentally. But also it's a spiritualist movement, so if there's not a stigmatized framework around it, then all right.
She literally said that when she was a child it would have been stigmatized, but now she is being super open with this.
Yeah.
So, as I stated before, there were several authors. So she claimed not only to receive writings from Edgar Allan Poe, but also from Robert Burns and William Shakespeare. But for the purposes of this podcast, we'll focus on Poe, since not only is it thematically accurate for the Through Midnight podcast, but she also has the most poems by him, and they were the most popular ones.
Okay.
So, I have a few poems that Poe wrote in his afterlife, apparently, that I would like to read to you, and then we'll see what you think of them.
Okay, hit me with it.
So, I'm only going to read a couple, just because they are very long.
Okay.
And so the most famous ones are The Streets of Baltimore and Farewell to Earth. So The Streets of Baltimore, and I think Lenore? Yeah. The Streets of Baltimore is a poem, apparently from Edgar Allan Poe, that speaks about his death.
Okay.
Yes.
Shout out to episode 1.
Shout out to episode 1.
Wait, I thought he died in Richmond.
I mean,
he lived for a long time in Baltimore, but I thought he died in Richmond.
I thought he was going from Richmond to either New York or Philadelphia and then stopped in Baltimore, and that's where
he was found in Baltimore. Yeah.
Come on, Lisa, you don't remember from like 2 years? A year and a half ago. 2 years. So I want to say that there's a spiritualist magazine or newspaper called the Banner of Light that Lizzie Doten was referenced in, and had stories about her a lot. So this is a little excerpt that's from Banner of Light. Edgar A. Poe, as the circumstances attendant upon the death of Poe were not generally known, it may be well to present the facts in connection with the following poem. Having occasion to pass through Baltimore a few days before his intended marriage with a lady of family and fortune in Virginia, Poe met with some of his old associates, who induced him to drink with them, although, as we are informed, he had entirely abstained for a year. This aroused the appetite which had so long slumbered within him, and in a short time he wandered forth into the streets in a state of drunken delirium, and was found the next morning literally dying from exposure. He was taken to a hospital, and on the 7th of October, 1849, at the age of 38, he closed his troubled life.
I thought he was 40.
I thought he was 42. I thought he was 40 as well, is what I'm saying.
Yeah.
So when I was reading this, I was like, they either didn't do their math right, or they just didn't cross-reference.
Yeah.
The tortures and terrors of that night of suffering are vividly portrayed in the following poem, composed in spirit life and given by him through the mediumship of Miss Lizzie Doten at the conclusion of her lecture in Baltimore on Sunday evening, January 11th, 1863. So, Banner of Light is saying, now that we have Poe's writing, we know what actually happened with his death.
He is actually 38.
He was just drunk, because this is, this is Spiritualist magazine, and so they're like, this is the facts.
Yeah.
Okay. So this is The Streets of Baltimore. Woman weak and woman mortal, through thy spirit's open portal, I would read the runic record of mine earthly being o'er. I would feel that fire returning, which within my soul was burning, when my star was quenched in darkness, set to rise on earth no more, when I sank beneath life's burden in the streets of Baltimore. Oh, those memories sore and saddening. Oh, the night of anguish maddening, when my lone heart suffered shipwreck on a demon-haunted shore. When the fiends grew wild with laughter, and the silence following after was more awful and appalling than the cannon's deadly roar, than the tramp of mighty armies through the streets of Baltimore. Like a fiery serpent coiling, like a maelstrom madly boiling, did this flinch fin of fury sweep my shuddering spirit o'er, rushing onward, blindly reeling, tortured by intensest feeling, like Prometheus, when the vultures through his quivering vitals tore, swift I fled from death and darkness through the streets of Baltimore. No one near to save nor or love me, no kind face to watch above me, though I heard the sound of footsteps like the waves upon the shore, beating, 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 now advancing, now retreating, with a dull and dreary rhythm, with a long continuous roar, heard the sound of human footsteps in the streets of Baltimore. There at length they found me lying, weak and wildered, sick and dying, and my shattered wreck of being to a kindly refuge bore. But my woe was past enduring, and my soul cast off its mooring, crying as I floated outwards, I am of the earth no more. I have forfeited life's blessing in the streets of Baltimore. Where wast thou, O power eternal, when the fiery fiend infernal beat me with his burning fasces, till I sank to rise no more? Oh, was all my lifelong error crowded in that night of terror? Did my sin find expiation, which to judgment went before, summoned to a dread tribunal in the streets of Baltimore? Nay, with deep delirious pleasure I had drained my life's full measure, till the fatal fiery serpent fed upon my being's core. Then with force and fire volcanic, summoning a strength titanic, did I burst the bonds that bound me, battered down my being's door, fled and left my shattered dwelling to the dust of Baltimore. Gazing back without lamenting, with no sorrowful repenting, I can read my life's sad story in a light unknown before. For there is no woe so dismal, not an evil so abysmal, but a rainbow arch of glory spans the yawning chasm o'er, and across that bridge of beauty did I pass from Baltimore. In that grand eternal city, where the angel hearts take pity on the sin which men forgive not or inactively deplore, earth has lost the power to harm me, death can never more alarm me, and I drink fresh inspiration from the source which I adore, through my spirit's apathesis, that new birth in Baltimore. Now no longer sadly yearning, love for love finds sweet returning, and there comes no ghastly raven tapping at my chamber door. Calmly in the golden glory I can sit and read life's story, for my soul from out that window hath been lifted evermore from that deep and dismal shadow in the streets of Baltimore.
Damn.
I know.
All right then. That's a lot. It's very evocative of the Raven, and not just the shade at the end. Because it's the same sort of rhyme scheme and stuff.
Now, his last poem was Farewell to Earth, which was purports to be Poe's final farewell to Earth. It was given in the city of New York, Monday evening, November 2nd, 1863.
Okay.
It's like 4 really long verses. So I'm going to read like the first verse, and then I'm going to just skip to the bottom and read like the very last bit. Okay.
So first stanza and like the last bit of the last stanza.
If you want to read the whole poem, I will list. This has been literally like her entire book of poems. Just that you can read through. Yeah. Cool. Of the first book that she ever published of poems. Okay. So this is Farewell to Earth. Farewell, farewell, like the music of a bell, floating downward to the dell, downward from some alpine height, while the sunset embers bright fade upon the hearth of night. So my spirit, voiceless, breathless, indestructible and deathless, from the heights of life Acelian, gives earth my parting song. Downward through the starlit spaces, unto earth's most lowly places, like the sun-born strains of Memnon, let the music float along. With a wild and wayward rhythm, with a movement deep and strong. Come up higher, cry the angels, this must be my parting song. Earth, O earth, thou art my mother. Mortal man, thou art my brother. We have shared a mutual sorrow. We have known a common birth. Yet with all my soul's endeavor, I will sunder and forever every tie of human passion that can bind my soul to earth. Every slavish tie that binds me to the things of little worth. Come up higher, cry the angels, come and bid farewell to earth. I would bear a love platonic to the souls in earthly life. I would give a sign Masonic to the heroes of this in the strife. I have been their fellow craftsman, bound apprentice to that art, whereby life that cunning draughtsman builds his temple in the heart. But with earth no longer mated, I have passed the first degree. I have been initiated to the second mystery. Oh, its high and holy meaning, not one soul shall fail to see. Now with loftiest aspirations, onward through the worlds I march, through the countless constellations, upward to the royal arch. Come up higher, cried the angels, come to the royal arch. And then I'm just going to skip to the bottom, and it's going to say, Sons of earth, where ye dwell, break temptation's magic spell. Truth is heaven and falsehood hell. Lawless lest a demon fell. Sons of earth, where ye dwell, in this heaven or in this hell, where ye hear the solemn swell of creation's mighty bell, sounding forth time's funeral knell, ye shall meet me where I dwell. Until then, farewell, farewell. Okay. Once again, similar cadence.
Yeah.
To the Raven.
Yeah.
We'll talk about that.
Yeah.
There was a publication of the publication was called the Springfield Republican. I think it was a newspaper. Mm-hmm. And it covered Doten's works, saying that either she or whoever it was that wrote the poem must have been very familiar with the writings of Poe. Because it has like very similar, you know, it sounds like it could have been, written by him.
Yeah.
So Lizzie responded to this, saying, as no one wrote the poem for me, consequently, I am the only one who can answer to the supposition. And I can say most conscientiously that previous to that time, I had never read, to my knowledge, any of his poems save The Raven. And I had not seen that for several years. Indeed, I may well say in this connection that I have read, comparatively speaking, very little poetry in the course of my life and have never made the style of any author a study. Which is hilarious because she did write poetry.
Yeah.
So she obviously studied it. But I saw your face when I said that the only poem she read was The Raven.
Yeah, and The Raven is very distinctive in its own right?
It's very distinctive. It was also very popular at the time.
Yeah, and I mean, I feel like even... I don't listen to some popular bands, but if you said, like, oh, have you heard this song? It goes like, yeah. Or whatever the song goes like, it's like, oh, yeah, I've probably heard it in the zeitgeist before.
Yeah. So The Raven was first published in January 1845, and it was like an instant success. And there were a lot of people who, it says, this one article says, it became, in a way, a 19th century meme, with people taking up its verse form and scenario in their own ends, be they comic, satiric, or serious. So she had to have been exposed to it with more than just having read it that one time.
Yeah.
Especially if it was literally like a meme. So it got parodied a lot. Like, there's a whole list, and this will also be in the links, the sources. But I'm showing you right now. So that's the original. Okay. These are all the parodies.
Okay.
And versions of it that have been made over the years.
Okay. That is a lot.
And a lot of them are from like the 1850s.
Yeah.
So even if she
had only vaguely heard of The Raven, she'd probably had
the cadence
in the zeitgeist.
Exactly.
Yeah. All right. Yeah, no, you could tell.
Yeah, exactly. Especially with the streets of Baltimore.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's just like, you got, I think until like the second or third stanza, by the time I was like, are you sure that this isn't just someone extending The Raven a little bit?
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
Anyway.
So, also, she basically said Poe communicated with her Shakespeare, Burns. She also at some point got like a prophetic reading. Not prophetic reading. She made a poem about the fate of Sir John Franklin, which was the Franklin expedition that happened.
Was that the one that caught in the ice?
Yes, the Arctic expedition.
Yeah.
Before they knew what happened to them, she was like... So she was kind of even dabbling in, like, prophecies, you know?
Yeah, that sounds like a lot.
Yeah. So, why was there such a focus on Edgar Allan Poe?
Why was there such a focus on Edgar Allan Poe? I mean, us, the hosts of a podcast called Dreary Midnight, would like to know.
Besides the fact that Poe's work is just very good.
Yeah.
It's timeless, jarring. You know, it has that... Not like he has that nice mix of, like, it's easy to understand, but it's also, like, there are some lines that are like, damn, you know?
Yeah.
Poe was really, like, the perfect candidate to become a spiritualist icon. Not just because of, like, all the things we said. He's a very iconic Gothic writer.
Yeah.
But so Poe wasn't, like, into that whole spiritual side of things. No. He did not believe in it, even if he wrote about it.
Yeah.
So he wrote some satirical stories, such as the facts in the case of M. Valdemar and Mesmeric Revelation. But sometimes those stories weren't read as satires. They weren't read on satires on mesmerism, but they were read as, like, a case history on mesmerism. You know what I mean?
Oh,
like,
they were read as fact when they were written as fiction.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Mesmeric Revelation, in particular, was once straight-facedly reproduced in the London Popular Record of Modern Science. Which, that must have pissed off Poe.
Yeah.
Because he didn't believe in that.
Yeah.
So he was already kind of an icon of that whole, like, movement. Yeah. It's like, look, he believes in what we believe in, even though he didn't.
Yeah.
He also died in 1849, which is only a year after the spiritualism movement started, because remember, it started with the Fox sisters in 1848.
Oh, yeah.
His death also being a mystery, and, like, just everything just made Poe, like, the perfect, like, this is our Gothic poster boy.
Yeah. I mean, and again, he wasn't super popular until after he died. Like... was revisiting the episode, and like 3 or 5 people attended his funeral. They didn't even bother with a sermon because there were so few people.
Yeah. Tim, I think you said that it was like 3 minutes long, like his funeral.
Yeah, 3 minutes, 5 minutes, something like that. So it's either 3 minutes and 5 people or 5 minutes and 3 people.
Yeah. Either way, it was a short amount of time and a short amount of small amount of people. Yeah. But yeah, so Poe actually was a frequent guest to many spiritualists, including Lydia Tenney, who lobbied to have her work that was Message from the Spirit of E.A. Poe added to Poe's collected works. So imagine...
That's presumptive.
Yeah, I was like, imagine believing so strongly that he has a conduit, that you are a conduit for him, that you're like, well, this is his work and we should put it in his, you know...
But then how do you prove that one way or the other, though?
You can't.
Know? Yeah.
Lizzie was another one of these spiritualists who said that he was, talking to her through poetry. Yeah. Or talking...
Poetry?
Talking to the world through her with his poetry, I guess was what Lizzie was saying.
Yeah.
She was very popular spiritualist. Like I said before, she was mentioned many times in Banner of Light. She attended lectures in which she would recite poetry given by direct spiritual influence in public. So she would just like go into a trance and start spouting poetry.
Okay. Wish I could do that, but all right.
I did read that during her lectures, before she like got into the whole like, okay, now I'm going to do the poem, she would speak about her religious philosophy, about women's rights, and other social reforms. She championed the cause of equal pay for women and spoke out against marriage as a means of survival.
Huh.
Yes, which is cool as hell.
Yeah.
And now I have a theory.
What?
Okay, first off, I'm going to read a little excerpt from, I think this is a book. It's called The Cryptographic Imagination, Secret Writing from Edgar Poe to the Internet. And it's Chapter 5, Resurrecti Poe in the Crypt of Lizzie Doten. And this quote is in regard to spiritualism. Right.
Okay.
The movement also liberated the pen as female spiritualists turned to the use of a nom dom to circumvent the gender and class restrictions placed on their writing. Possessed by the spirit of a Quaker named Patience Worth, Pearl Curran poured forth a serious and torrential literary output, dictating plays, dramatic poems, and novels, most of which were published. When entrenched, she could write 2 works at once, shifting effortlessly back and forth between them. In 1928, Aura May Holland burst suddenly into song, an event that so shocked her husband that he wrote a book trying to explain the phenomenon. For the lucky few, spiritualism even provided a career. Doten made a better living through trans lectures and royalties received from volumes of poetry, a novel, Hesper the Home Spirit Story of Household Labor and Love, and a collection of short fiction than she ever had as an impoverished needleworker and teacher.
Huh. Interesting.
So, my theory is that she did this on purpose, where she knew I can be a writer, I can be an author, but I can get an edge by saying that these poems are written by famous authors, and then I can write my own poetry and put it in that book, because the whole first half of her poetry book is her own works, and the second half is the works that she had with other authors, other dead authors. So my theory is that she knew, she didn't think that he was actually talking to her, but she kind of used it to her advantage. And then when she actually gained a platform, she speaked out against things that she actually believed in, like women equality.
I like that.
And that is my theory, and I don't know if I'm wrong or right, but I like it.
Yeah.
Because it kind of makes her, she was a very educated woman.
Yeah.
Like she was, and she came from a very prominent family.
Yeah.
So it's not super prominent, but I feel like it was, she never I don't know. She never was malicious with any of the things that she said. She wasn't I can talk to somebody's relatives or something.
Yeah.
So to me, it's just a little, it's not necessarily innocent. She's still tricking people. But I like my theory that she was just being very smart.
And getting herself a platform to also advocate for other things.
Exactly.
Yeah. I like that.
So Lizzie published her last book in 1871 and retired from public speaking in 1880, which is probably for health reasons, although according to at least one source, Miss Doten withdrew from the lecture field and mediumistic work by reason of the fact that she had become unable to determine the point at which her personality ceased to act and the agency of spirit influence began. So according to one source, it was just that she was getting too caught up in the, spiritual stuff. And so she retired. In the 1880s, she moved to California, where she married longtime companion Zabadiel Adams Willard. And
what a name.
I know. She married him in 1902 at the age of 75.
All right.
So that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Might as well.
Wait, how old was he? Also in his 70s?
He also was in his 70s.
So here I am thinking a little bit it could be someone in their 30s, which is ugh.
No, because I think he was also born, when she was born in 1827, he was born in 1826.
Okay.
So he was only a year older than her.
Yeah.
From the research, it seemed like after his wife died, they got married. So I feel like they were lifelong friends. And then also quote unquote friends. Yeah. After they got married, Lizzie and Zabadiel moved back to Massachusetts, and Lizzie died January 15th, 1913 at the age of 85. She lies buried in the Willard family plot at Mount Auburn Cemetery.
Cool. And
that is the life and works of Lizzie Doten.
All right.
So what do you think?
I mean, I think she's very much subject to the constructs of the time in a lot of ways, both with spiritualism and with the social causes against which she is trying to act.
I had never heard of her.
Same. This is my first time.
But when I was like researching her, I was like, this is really interesting.
Yeah. And I feel like she falls into a certain category, as you say with your own theory, of like who have something to say but need to fudge the platform in order to get one in order to say it. With all that said, what are your thoughts? We would love to hear. DrearyMidnightPodcast@gmail.com, or message us on Instagram at DrearyMidnightPod.
Are we a conduit for?
I certainly
for
hope
Edgar
not.
Allan Poe?
Rate and review. Spotify and Apple Podcasts are the best way to do that, and therefore to reach new listeners. And if you like us and want to give us money, we would very much appreciate that. Patreon.com/DrearyMidnight. With all that said, be careful about being a conduit for things. Just
and
play safe with spirits in every sense of the word.
Be wary of ghostwriters.
Yeah.
Literally.
In any sense of the word. And safe travels home on this dreary midnight. Good night.
Good night.